Hello. So normally this channel is for League of Legends stuff, esports conversation. I don't tend to do too much of that on this channel these days other than esports and chill, but we're going to try an experiment where I talk about something that I want to talk about that isn't necessarily related to that. Maybe that's something this channel could be. I don't know. I'm very busy these days, so we'll see how this turns out. Anyway, I just got out of the Warcraft movie, and I tweeted about it and had a lot of people tweet back at me because my opinion was that it wasn't very good and that I was disappointed in it. And so I thought maybe instead of doing something written or whatever, I would just talk about it because I kind of want to rant about it. And maybe I'll upload this to my channel. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just delete it. Either way, it should go without saying that there are now going to be spoilers talking about the Warcraft movie, which is mostly based on Warcraft lore. But there's some changes. So anyway, if you don't want those spoilers, do not continue to watch this. You should turn off the video. And also, this is not organized in any coherent way. I'm just going to be talking for a while. So if you don't want that, then turn off the video. But let's dive into it. All right, so Warcraft. Okay, well, first off, I should give you the context for my experiences with Warcraft. I'm a very big Warcraft fan. I got into RTS and sort of hardcore PC gaming through StarCraft, but very shortly after I got into StarCraft, Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos came out. Played that on Frozen Throne for a super long time, played Dota, and then have spent probably literally years of my life playing World of Warcraft. I've played every expansion. I don't do too much hardcore raiding, but I've always enjoyed the story and have taken issue with some of the ways that the story has gone recently. But really enjoyed the lore. I've read some Warcraft novels, I believe, and I've spent just a ton of time getting into it. I remember specifically reading the book that came with Warcraft 3, which was like written by Chris Metzen, and there were just all these little chapters that told you sort of the story about like the world tree and Illidan and all the backstory that went into Warcraft 3. And really enjoying that. I remember specifically where I was when I read that stuff in junior high. So anyway, I'm a huge fan of Warcraft. And I guess what I would say is that I knew going to this movie that it was going to be very disappointing. And I actually saw it just now with Mark Zimmerman of Blame Game fame. And we walked on the movie. And I guess what I told him, and he agreed with me, was like I walked in feeling expecting nothing and was still disappointed, to reference that meme. So here's a couple reasons why. I think that the references to Warcraft stuff, like the Murloc showing up, the flight path into Stormwind being basically the same flight path, the Griffin landing at the same place where the flight path goes in Stormwind, seeing like Ironforge and all these cool little moments was actually quite neat. But none of it was so overshadowed by so many flaws. One of which is just the poor acting. I did not think that there were so many moments where I'm like, it's just jarring how bad the acting is. Like there was not one good acting experience that I can think of, other than maybe like Duratan seemed kind of good. Everybody else felt kind of inhuman. I just felt like they were not. There was never a point in time where I was sold on sort of them or enjoyed any kind of banter that they had, which was, I guess, very closely linked. Like, these might be talented actors, but it seemed like if they were talented actors, they were not able to execute on the skill set that they have because the script writing, maybe even specifically the dialogue, was just awful. A couple of things that I knew that popped out of my head is just thinking along those lines. When he's like, oh, I'm going to kill your master, right in the beginning, whenever he's holding the orc that he's knocked unconscious, Lothar. And he's like trying to scare off the Frostwolf. And then the Frostwolf leaves and he's like, oh, that would have made a very good pelt, or something like that. It's like a Avenger-style funny quip that you quickly move on from, and it's supposed to be funny. But it's not funny. It's just like, oh, okay, and it just moves on. And like the part where Garona finally meets King Lane, and she's like talking to him and acting all strange, and King Lane is like, oh yeah, fine, just let this random girl walk by me. and sort of like smell my wolf statue. There were just so many moments where like the dialogue just does not connect. Like the son, Lothar's son, who just was like the worst plot point ever. Like that should have just axed that whole thing. Like him saying for the Alliance and charging forward. It's like such a forced attempt at putting like a World of Warcraft line in, or Warcraft line in. Ugh. So the writing was, or the dialogue writing was bad, but I would also say that the script itself was very poor. So, for instance, the movie, I think ultimately so much of this is that the movie tries to do too many things at once. So, there's an interview out there about how whenever Duncan Jones came in, the director, he was originally, it was a story about humans trying to fight against this horde of invading orcs, and that Duncan was like, actually, I want to show it from both sides, right? So the orc side and the human side. And I think that, among with so many other things, made the film so scattered. It was really hard to connect with any of these characters, and yet they still try to do it anyway, right? So they could have just owned it by making these characters like cool and fight cool and like seem badass and like seem like they have some mysterious past, but instead what they try to do is connect you to the characters in these short little bursts of moments. So a great example is there's that moment where Khadgar and Garona and Lothar are all around the fire, and they're talking about sort of their past, and Garona is like implying that she was raped or something, or she talked about how all of her bones were broken while she was having sex, and they're strong now. And then Khadgar tries to talk about how it sucked, like having to go to the Wizard Academy and then like leaving the Wizard Academy. And it's just like, okay, in like a minute, they're trying to use this 1 minute of conversation to establish like an affinity or a sort of, attempt to just feel bad for these characters that are otherwise never really talked about their backgrounds. It's like, oh, in this moment you'll feel really bad for them, and then that'll connect you to them, and it's like not going to work that way. And that stuff consistently happens. King Lane, who cares about this guy? Like, his acting is bad, his dialogue is weird. Khadgar is like this funny, kind of dorky guy. He almost gets there, but doesn't. And then Medivh is like supposed to be this super badass character, and you only really ever see him to struggle to get off some weird spells, which don't really feel like Warcraft spells. Like there were a couple moments where I saw Warcraft spells, and that felt really rewarding to me as a Warcraft fan, like a fireball or whatever. But I'm like, why aren't these mages shooting off like frost bolts and stuff? And the first thing you see Medivh do is like use some sort of fell draining spell. I don't know. They don't even execute on badass moments well. So you have Khadgar towards the end fighting Medivh, who's now turned into like an Illidan looking demon character because of the fell. Like, I feel bad for anybody who isn't a Warcraft fan and had to go see this, because it's like, what is the fell? What is any of this stuff? Like, there's no mention of the fact that Sargeras is like influencing him, and anyway, you get to this end and like, oh, we're gonna teleport this golem on top of him, and that's how we'll kill him in the fell pool. And we need him to get on top of the fell pool, so he's gonna like bait him in by saying a bunch of weird stuff. Like, almost none of these scenes were interesting or cool. And then they just seem to fail to really do anything cool for Warcraft fans out of gimmicky but fun moments like the Murloc or whatever. For instance, they add, like, why is there this weird black box in Dalaran and with a weird mage chick in it? I looked it up, and apparently this was supposed to be the first, because I didn't even recognize the name that was given there. And again, I think I'm a pretty big Warcraft fan, but in one of the comics or something like that, they reference this character who was the first guardian of Tirisfal, and that's the mage that gives the advice about how Medivh is like corrupted. And I'm like, why is there this black box here? What is going on? It's just very strange. And they seem to just do all these things where they're like adding all this stuff, but then they're unable to really give they're not willing to bend the Warcraft lore to give fans like the real cool moments. Like the kid is very obviously like Orc Child is obviously Thrall, but they won't even call him Thrall. The name Thrall is not mentioned once. I understood that the idea might be that the humans that adopt him call him Thrall, but and so he doesn't have that name yet. But again, if you're going to bend things like make Garona a half human and make Dalaran already flying, even though it doesn't fly until like 100 years or whatever later, whenever it goes to after it gets destroyed in Warcraft 3. I don't know why you wouldn't just call him Thrall. So overall, like there's just so many cringy moments. Oh my god, I literally like face palmed when Lothar's son died, and then afterwards he's like laying on the bar all sad, and then like Garona goes and like kisses his neck. It's just such a poorly written, poorly acted, poorly like dialogued out scene. So anyway, it's just hard because I really wanted to enjoy the movie. I had the expectations that it would be, not a good movie, but maybe a fun thing for a Warcraft fan like myself to enjoy. But it was just too hard to enjoy it. I don't regret going and seeing it because it was neat to sort of see what they did. But it's such a disappointing situation that this thing that had like so much time and energy and hundreds of millions of dollars put into it just couldn't find at least one area to excel in. Like it could have had just awesome action sequences and just been like this action movie. It could have been just a Warcraft fan movie and just have all these like call-outs for Warcraft fans. It could have been like a story, like you could have abandoned so much of the Warcraft canon just to try to tell a really cool story about two characters, right? Like Lothar and Garona. If they really just wanted to make it about these two people, they could have had awesome actors doing awesome things and like tell the story of like a human and this like half orc chick like trying to come together underneath like almost like Romeo and Juliet stuff. You could have had just these two central figures in King Lane and Duratan struggling to make the right decision for their people. You could have focused on just like the internal struggle of Medivh as he's like trying to save his like people while also dealing with this demonic influence and sort of the trade-offs that are made there. You did none of it. You just made a very scattered, strange movie that is somewhat embarrassing to watch. And I'm just sad. I don't hate it. This is not me trying to shit all over it because I like hate the movie or something. Just these are sort of my feelings about where it went wrong. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this if you watched the movie. Sorry, I'll try to talk about some more League of Legends stuff in the future or something.